You might be surprised to learn that the United States keeps an enormous amount of oil stored underneath Texas and Louisiana. Imagine a vertical salt cave, almost twice the size of Chicago's Willis Tower. It would be about 200 feet wide and 2,500 feet deep, filled with oil. And now imagine 60 of them. This is the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. And US President Joe Biden just announced the largest release in history from these reserves. 180 million barrels of oil released at the rate of 1 million barrels per day for 6 months. In this video, we're going to explain what was just announced, what the Strategic Petroleum Reserve is, why it was established in the first place, how often it's been used in the past, and what the intended impact might be. Hey everyone, my name is Preet, and this channel is for anyone who wants to learn more about the world of money around us. On Thursday, March 31st, 2022, the White House announced the biggest ever release of oil from the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. 1 million barrels of oil per day will be released to refineries for the next 6 months. Oil prices dropped on the news, with U.S. crude futures dropping almost 6% on the day at one point. The second largest release in history was 50 million barrels back only in November of last year. That release, an attempt to lower oil prices and in turn gasoline prices, as consumers had been feeling pain at the pumps. This time, the reason is essentially the same. Oil and gas prices have still been surging, and here's a picture of how much it cost me to fill up a tank on a recent trip in British Columbia. Prices are so high that buy now, pay later companies like Klarna are seeing more people turn to micro installment loans to fill up their tanks. With gasoline prices already trending higher before the supply disruption due to the Russian invasion of Ukraine, the Biden administration's latest use of the Strategic Petroleum Reserve is 3.6 times larger than any release in history. What is the Strategic Petroleum Reserve? The Strategic Petroleum Reserve is the world's largest supply of emergency crude oil. It's run by the United States Department of Energy, which uses giant vertical salt caves located underneath Texas and Louisiana to store up to 713.5 million barrels of oil. Currently, there is approximately 568 million barrels of oil there right now. The president can make the decision to tap into these reserves, and once he or she does, oil can be released to the market within 13 days of direction. The Secretary of Energy can also authorize smaller releases of up to 5 million barrels. The logistical limit of how much crude can be shipped from the reserve is 4.4 million barrels per day, and because unrefined crude is stored, it goes to refineries first and then gets refined into other petroleum products like gasoline for our cars and trucks. But the announcement of a release can have an impact on energy markets as it signals an increase in supply is coming. Why was the Strategic Petroleum Reserve established? Well, in 1973, an oil embargo was imposed on the United States and other countries around the world by the Organization of Arab Petroleum Exporting Countries. In the span of 6 months, the price of oil rose 300%, creating an energy crisis and a recession. This energy crisis led to drastic measures such as the introduction of lowered speed limits to as low as 50 miles per hour in some U.S. states under legislation known as the National Maximum Speed Limit, or NMSL. In this map on the right-hand side, we see the pre-NMSL speeds, with dark green representing a limit of 75 miles per hour prior to the crisis. To protect the economy from future energy crises, President Gerald Ford signed into law the Energy Policy and Conservation Act of 1975, which established the Strategic Petroleum Reserve, or SPR. It allowed for storage of up to 1 billion barrels of petroleum products. These stores mitigate the risk of both domestic and international crude oil disruptions, increases the energy security of the nation, and is a key foreign policy tool. How often has the SPR been used in the past? The SPR has been used many times in the past, but not to the same extent as today's announcement. It's been tapped during Desert Storm in 1990 and the Arab Spring in 2011 as conflicts threatened oil exports from those regions. It was also called upon during Hurricane Katrina's aftermath, the hurricane shutting down over 90% of crude oil production in the Gulf of Mexico. In 1996, reserves were sold off to help reduce the national deficit, and the two most recent drawdowns came within the last 6 months. 50 million barrels in November 2021 to help combat inflation and prices at the pumps, and 30 million barrels at the beginning of March 2022 in response to expected oil supply disruption due to Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Will this bring down gas prices? If we look at the 50 million barrel release announced on November 23rd of last year, here's what happened to national average gas prices after that. There are many variables that affect gas prices, and we could likely argue that prices would have been higher without the release, all other things being equal, but consumers certainly didn't feel much relief because prices didn't really go down much. Roger Reed, a senior energy analyst at Wells Fargo Securities, interviewed by CNBC, said the current release announcement equates to 1% of daily global production and 5% of U.S. consumption. Essentially saying it's not nothing, but it's not going to bring prices down on its own to a point where we stop noticing high prices. The Washington Post's editorial board calls the move a massive effort for a little bit of relief at the pumps, however noting that it's probably the right call to tap into the reserves at this time. So there might be some reprieve for higher prices at the pumps, but that may come mostly in the form of preventing even higher prices as opposed to seeing a sharp reduction in prices. If you like this video, I would appreciate it if you hit that like button and subscribe to my channel to learn more about money and managing your finances. And of course, hit the bell to turn on notifications for when I publish new content, and I will see you in the next video.